A single father sees a waitress playing with his son, and in that one unexpected moment, everything changes. She isn't just kind, she his child in a way no one else ever has. As laughter fills the booth, something stirs in him, a feeling he thought he'd buried forever. But behind her smile, the waitress hides a painful past of her own, and secrets that could shatter the fragile hope they're just beginning to build. What happens when love finds you in the last place you expected, and will he risk everything to hold on to it? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Jacob Reed drummed his fingers against the leather steering wheel, navigating through the thick morning fog that blanketed the city streets. The rhythmic swoosh of windshield wipers cut through the silence inside his sleek black SUV. His phone buzzed again, the 5th time in 10 minutes, but he forced himself to ignore it. In the rearview mirror, he caught glimpses of Max, his 6-year-old son, staring out the window with those big, serious eyes that seemed too old for his young face. The stuffed green dinosaur, Mr. Rex, was clutched tightly against his blue sweater, its well-worn fabric telling stories of countless nights of comfort. "You okay back there, buddy?" Jacob asked, his voice gentle. Max nodded without looking away from the window, his small fingers absently stroking Mr. Rex's fuzzy head. The fog outside made everything look soft and far away, like a dream. Another buzz from the phone. Jacob sighed and reached for it, scanning the notification. Urgent, investment meeting rescheduled. With a quick swipe, he silenced the device completely. Saturday mornings were for Max. That was the rule he'd made for himself 3 years ago, after Sarah. He pushed the thought away and focused on driving. His tailored navy blazer felt suddenly tight across his shoulders. He loosened his tie, wondering why he'd bothered with it in the first place. Old habits died hard, he supposed. The streets were quiet this early, with only a few other cars sharing the road. Shop owners were just starting to flip their closed signs to open, and the occasional jogger emerged from the fog like a ghost before disappearing again. "Almost there," Jacob said, more to fill the silence than anything else. Max's reflection nodded again, his small face serious as ever. The old downtown diner appeared through the mist, its neon open sign glowing softly in the gray morning light. The building was showing its age, paint peeling at the corners, one shutter slightly crooked, but it had character, as Sarah would have said. Jacob pulled into an empty spot near the entrance. "Ready for breakfast?" he asked, turning in his seat to look at Max properly. For the first time that morning, Max's face brightened. He peered through the foggy window toward the diner's front door, clutching Mr. Rex a little less tightly. Jacob knew exactly what, or rather who, his son was looking for. Inside, the diner was warm and smelled of coffee and maple syrup. The bell above the door chimed as they entered, and several regulars nodded at Jacob in recognition. But Max's eyes went straight to the counter, where Nora was pouring coffee for an elderly couple. She looked up at the sound of the bell, and her whole face lit up when she saw Max. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, with a few strands escaping around her face. The standard-issue blue uniform somehow looked different on her, less like a uniform and more like something she'd chosen to wear. "Could we sit in Nora's section?" Max whispered, tugging at Jacob's sleeve. Jacob caught the host's attention. "Table for 2 in Nora's section, please." They were led to their usual booth by the window. Max slid in first, placing Mr. Rex carefully beside him. Jacob sat opposite, resisting the urge to check his silenced phone. Nora appeared moments later, notepad in hand. "Well, if it isn't my favorite Saturday morning customer," she said, speaking directly to Max. "And look who he brought with him, Mr. Rex." She leaned in conspiratorially. "Hey Max, what did the dinosaur say after crashing his car?" Max's eyes widened with interest. "What? I'm Dinosaur!" Nora delivered the punchline with a grin. A giggle escaped Max's lips, a sound so rare these days that it made Jacob's chest tighten. He watched as Nora reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a paper napkin. With quick, practiced movements, she folded it into a neat triangle, then continued folding until it resembled a plane. "Want to see if this one flies better than last week's?" she asked, holding up the creation. Max nodded eagerly, scooting closer to the window to give the plane room to fly. Nora took careful aim and launched it with a gentle flick of her wrist. The paper plane glided smoothly across the table, landing right next to Max's hand. His face broke into a full smile as he picked it up, examining the crisp folds. "Sir?" Nora's voice shifted to professional politeness as she addressed Jacob. "The usual for you both?" Jacob nodded, noting how she barely met his eyes. "Yes, thank you. Chocolate chip pancakes for him, eggs Benedict for me." "Coming right up," she said with a quick nod before turning away, her shoes squeaking slightly on the worn linoleum floor. While they waited for their food, Jacob watched Max fly the paper plane back and forth across the table, making soft whooshing sounds under his breath. The fog outside had started to lift, sending weak sunlight through the window that caught the dust motes dancing in the air. Their breakfast arrived quickly, Max's pancakes decorated with a whipped cream smile that made him giggle again. Throughout the meal, Nora stopped by their table several times, always with a new joke or silly question for Max, who grew more animated with each visit. She refilled Jacob's coffee without him having to ask, but otherwise treated him with a professional distance that bordered on coolness. Jacob didn't mind. He was too focused on the transformation in his son. How Max's shoulders relaxed, how his eyes sparkled, how he spoke in full sentences instead of whispers and nods. It was worth every Saturday morning, worth silencing every phone notification, worth the drive through the fog just to see this version of his son emerge. As they finished their meal, Jacob noticed Max's eyes following Nora as she moved between tables, her easy laugh carrying across the diner as she chatted with other customers. She had a way about her that made everyone feel special, but Jacob couldn't help but notice she was especially gentle with Max. When Jacob signaled for the check, Max's face fell slightly. He pushed his empty plate away and picked up the paper plane, smoothing its wings with careful fingers. Standing up to leave, Jacob felt a small tug on his sleeve. He looked down to find Max's upturned face, serious once again. "Dad," Max whispered, clutching Mr. Rex with one hand and the paper plane with the other. "Can we come again next Saturday?" "Of course we can, buddy," Jacob replied softly, resting his hand on Max's shoulder. As they walked to the door, Jacob glanced back through the diner window. Nora was already at their table, efficiently clearing away the dishes. She paused in her work, reaching down to pick up a crumpled paper plane that had fallen to the floor. With a small smile, she carefully smoothed it out and tucked it into her apron pocket before continuing her work. Sunday morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Jacob's penthouse apartment, casting long shadows across the pristine hardwood floors. The city sprawled below like a silent movie, cars moving in slow motion, 40 stories down. Jacob sat in his ergonomic chair, a steaming cup of black coffee warming his hands, as he watched Max on the white carpet. The 6-year-old methodically sorted through pieces of a new Lego set, arranging them by color and size. His small fingers worked with careful precision, consulting the instruction manual spread out before him. Mr. Rex sat propped against a throw pillow, keeping watch over the proceedings. The apartment was immaculate, all clean lines, chrome fixtures, and minimalist furniture in shades of white and gray. Everything had its place, every surface gleamed, but the perfection felt hollow, like a model home waiting for real people to move in and give it life. Jacob's eyes drifted to the bookshelf where, partially hidden behind a row of business books, sat a silver-framed photograph. He didn't need to look at it directly. He knew every detail by heart. Sarah's bright smile, her wild curls caught by the wind at the beach, her arms wrapped around a 3-year-old Max. It was the last vacation they'd taken together. The coffee had grown cold in his hands. Jacob set it down and pulled out his phone, more out of habit than necessity. Sunday mornings were usually quiet on the business front. As he scrolled mindlessly through emails, his mind wandered back to the conversation from 2 weeks ago. The therapist's office had been deliberately cozy. Warm colors, soft lighting, plants in every corner. Everything Jacob's apartment wasn't. He'd sat stiffly on the oversized couch while Max played with toys in the corner, barely acknowledging the woman across from him. Max's teacher mentioned he's been increasingly withdrawn at school, Dr. Martinez had said, her voice gentle but direct. He rarely participates in group activities, and he's been spending recess alone. Jacob had shifted uncomfortably. He's always been quiet, like me. Being introverted isn't the concern, she'd explained, leaning forward slightly. What we're seeing is social anxiety and emotional withdrawal. Children who've experienced loss need consistent, warm social environments to develop healthy attachment patterns. He'd nodded politely, already mentally moving on to his next meeting. Social environments meant playdates and birthday parties, things Sarah had always handled. The thought of organizing those himself made his chest tight. It doesn't have to be complicated, Doctor. Martinez had continued, as if reading his mind. Regular positive interactions with the same people can make a huge difference. Familiar faces, comfortable spaces, consistency is key. Now, watching Max build his Lego creation in silence, those words echoed in Jacob's mind. The boy's face was set in concentration, but there was a tension in his small shoulders that shouldn't be there. Not in a 6-year-old. Jacob opened his web browser and typed "Downtown Diner" into the search bar. The results populated quickly. A handful of reviews, a basic website, and a Facebook page. He clicked through the reviews first, scanning the comments about home-style cooking and friendly service. Several mentioned Nora by name. Best waitress ever. Makes you feel like family. Always has a smile and a joke ready. The Facebook page was simple but active. Photos of daily specials, holiday decorations, staff celebrations. Jacob scrolled slowly until a particular image made him pause. It was Nora, but not in her usual diner uniform. She wore jeans and a faded t-shirt with "City Animal Shelter" printed across the front. She was laughing, holding a tray of what looked like homemade cookies, while a banner behind her announced Annual Pet Adoption Day. Her hair was down in the photo, falling in waves past her shoulders instead of pulled back in its usual practical bun. Her smile reached all the way to her eyes, creating little crinkles at the corners. She looked real, warm. Everything his carefully curated world wasn't. Jacob found himself studying the image longer than necessary, noting details he had no business noticing, like the small flower smudge on her cheek, or the way she seemed completely unself-conscious despite being caught mid-laugh. He quickly closed the browser, feeling oddly guilty, as if he'd intruded on something private. The sound of Legos clicking together had stopped. Jacob looked up to find Max staring intently at his half-finished creation, his small face pinched with frustration. A familiar ache bloomed in Jacob's chest, the helpless feeling of watching his son struggle and not knowing how to fix it. Dr. Martinez's words came back to him. Consistent, warm social environments. The diner was the only place he'd seen Max truly relax lately, the only place he smiled without being prompted. And it wasn't the pancakes that drew him back week after week. Jacob cleared his throat softly. "Hey, buddy," he said, setting his phone aside. "I was thinking about next Saturday. Want to try somewhere different for breakfast? There's a new place uptown that makes Mickey Mouse-shaped waffles." Max didn't look up from his Legos. His fingers tightened around the piece he was holding. "No," he said quietly but firmly. "I want Nora." The simple honesty of the statement hung in the air between them. No pretense, no manipulation, just the pure, straightforward need of a child who had found something that made him feel safe. Later, The rain drummed against the diner's windows, turning the early morning light into a gray haze. Water dripped from Jacob's expensive wool coat as he ushered Max through the door, both of them looking like they'd just taken an impromptu swim. Max's dinosaur backpack was spotted with dark patches, and his usually neat hair was plastered to his forehead. Oh, my goodness. Nora's voice carried across the nearly empty diner, her eyes widening dramatically as she hurried toward them. Look who got caught by the rain monsters. Max's face lit up despite his soggy state. He bounced slightly on his toes, water droplets flying from his jacket. Quick! Nora ducked behind the counter and emerged with a stack of paper towels. She swept one around Max's shoulders like a cape, securing it with a gentle twist. There! Now you're Super Max, defender against rain monsters everywhere. Max giggled, the sound bright against the steady patter of rain outside. Nora fashioned another paper towel cape for Jacob, who stood awkwardly holding his dripping briefcase. And for Sir, she said with an exaggerated bow, though her eyes didn't quite meet his. Can't have anyone catching cold in my section. Jacob cleared his throat, attempting to match her playful tone. Well, I heard Seattle was rainy, but this is more like someone forgot to turn off the cosmic shower. His joke fell flat in the space between them, hanging there like the damp air outside. Nora's expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. You don't have to try so hard, she said quietly, just for him to hear. Max likes you already. The words carried a double edge, part reassurance, part warning. She turned back to Max before Jacob could respond. Your usual booth awaits, brave knight. She led them to their regular spot, already set with Max's favorite blue plastic cup and a fresh coloring page featuring a stegosaurus. The familiar rhythm of Saturday morning settled over them. Max removed his wet jacket, carefully arranging his paper towel cape before sliding into the booth. Jacob sat opposite him, his own cape forgotten and crumpled beside him. I'll get your orders started, Nora said, already backing away toward the kitchen. Can't keep a superhero waiting. In the kitchen's fluorescent glare, Nora pulled out a fresh pancake and began carefully cutting it into the shape of a T-Rex. Her hands moved with practiced precision, crafting spiky ridges along the back and adding chocolate chip eyes. Well, well, Tammy's voice drawled from behind her. The older waitress leaned against the prep station, arms crossed. There you go again, playing artist with the pancakes. You know, you're always a little different when that table comes in. I do this for all the kids, Nora replied, not looking up from her work. She added a small smile made of whipped cream to the dinosaur's face. Uh-huh, Tammy smirked. That's why you spent 10 minutes perfecting that paper plane design last night after your shift. It's just... Nora paused, searching for words that wouldn't give Tammy more ammunition. Max is a sweet kid. He needs a little extra magic in his breakfast, that's all. And his daddy needs a little extra magic in his coffee. Tammy raised an eyebrow. Nora's shoulders tensed. His father is a customer, Tam. That's it. If you say so, honey. Tammy grabbed her coffee pot and headed back to the dining room, leaving Nora alone with her thoughts and her carefully crafted pancake art. When Nora emerged from the kitchen, balancing the special pancake plate, she caught sight of a small commotion at the booth. Jacob was reaching across the table, trying to help Max with his juice cup. His expensive sleeve dragged through a puddle of syrup as the cup tipped, sending orange juice cascading across the table. Nora moved without thinking. 3 quick steps brought her to the table, where she smoothly set down the pancake plate with one hand, while grabbing her serving towel with the other. The juice disappeared under efficient swipes of her cloth before it could reach Max's coloring page. Here you go, sweetie, she said, producing a fresh cup of juice with a bendy straw from her apron pocket. She positioned it carefully in front of Max, angled away from his artwork. The whole sequence took less than 30 seconds. Jacob sat back, his face flushed with embarrassment. I'm sorry, I was just trying to... But Nora had already turned away, moving to help another customer who'd just walked in. The wall was back up, higher than before. She spent the rest of their meal carefully timing her check-ins when Jacob was occupied with his phone or Max was focused on his food. Her sunny demeanor remained, but it was directed entirely at Max, as if Jacob had become invisible. The rain had settled into a gentle mist by the time Jacob and Max gathered their things to leave. Max carefully folded his paper towel cape and offered it back to Nora, who tucked it into her apron with a conspiratorial wink. "Keep it," she whispered. "You never know when those rain monsters might strike again." After they disappeared through the door, Nora felt her phone vibrate in her pocket for the third time that morning. She pulled it out, staring at the screen. 3 missed calls from a contact labeled "Don't Answer." Her jaw tightened as she silenced the phone and slipped it back into her apron. The paper plane Max had been playing with lay abandoned on the table, its wings slightly crumpled but still holding the careful folds she'd put into them the night before. Nora picked it up gently, smoothing one bent corner before tucking it into her apron pocket alongside its predecessors. She grabbed her cleaning spray and a fresh cloth, attacking the sticky remnants of syrup with more force than necessary. Her smile, which had been so bright and easy with Max, had thinned to a tight line. The morning rush would start soon. She didn't have time to think about persistent phone calls or complicated customers or the way Max's face lit up every time she approached their table. The fluorescent lights of the diner had long since faded when Nora climbed the 3 flights of stairs to her apartment. Her feet ached from the double shift, and her ponytail had gone limp hours ago. The key stuck in the lock like it always did, requiring a specific wiggle she'd mastered months ago. Inside, the small living room was lit only by the blue glow of a phone screen. Lily sat cross-legged on the worn carpet, surrounded by scattered textbooks and crumpled paper. Her dark hair fell in a curtain around her face as she bobbed her head to whatever was playing through her oversized headphones. "Hey, kiddo," Nora called out, dropping her keys in the chipped ceramic bowl by the door. The bowl was one of Lily's early art projects, misshapen but treasured. Lily didn't look up. Nora crossed the room and gently tapped her sister's shoulder. Lily jumped, yanking her headphones down around her neck. Music leaked out, something with heavy bass and angry lyrics. "You scared me," Lily accused, but her scowl softened when she saw how tired her sister looked. "Sorry," Nora said, settling onto their second-hand couch. Her eyes drifted to the math textbook lying open beside Lily, pages pristine and clearly unread. "How was tutoring today?" Lily's shoulders tensed. "I didn't go." Lily ... I know. Lily's voice took on a defensive edge. "But Ms. Peterson is boring, and I hate the way she talks to me like I'm stupid." "She's trying to help you pass algebra," Nora said, rubbing her temples. "Your grade is my problem," Lily cut in. "Besides, you're one to talk. You're too busy playing mom to random kids at the diner to even notice what's going on here." The words hit their mark. Nora felt them like a physical blow, but she was too exhausted to argue. Instead, she slid down to the floor beside her sister and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "We'll figure it out tomorrow, okay?" she said softly. "I love you." Lily's expression wavered between anger and something more vulnerable before settling back into teenage indifference. "Whatever," she mumbled, but she leaned slightly into Nora's side. Nora dragged herself to her feet and headed to her tiny bedroom, leaving Lily to her homework, or lack thereof. The weight of being both sister and parent settled heavy on her shoulders as she collapsed onto her bed, still in her uniform. Saturday arrived with golden morning light streaming through the diner's windows. Nora was arranging sugar packets when she heard the familiar bell above the door. Max bounded in ahead of Jacob, practically vibrating with excitement. His dinosaur backpack bounced against his shoulders as he rushed to their usual booth. "Careful, buddy," Jacob called after him, his usual pristine appearance slightly rumpled, as if he'd been rushed out the door. Nora approached their table with her standard greeting ready, but Max was practically bouncing in his seat, both hands hidden behind his back. "I have something for you," he burst out before she could speak. Jacob looked up from his phone, surprise crossing his features. Max? Max produced a slightly crushed envelope from behind his back. It was made of construction paper, decorated with wobbly crayon drawings of balloons and what appeared to be dinosaurs wearing party hats. He thrust it toward Nora, his face flushed with excitement and nervousness. "It's my birthday next week," he said in a rush. "You're invited." Nora's hands trembled slightly as she accepted the envelope. The paper was warm from being clutched in Max's small hands. She opened it carefully, treating it like the precious thing it was. Inside was a birthday invitation, clearly made by Max himself. Stick figures danced across the page, one with spiky yellow hair that must be Max, another tall one in what looked like a suit, Jacob, and a figure with long brown lines for hair, wearing what might have been an apron, her. Balloons and stars filled every empty space, and an address was written in careful block letters, obviously copied from somewhere. "Max!" Jacob's voice held a note of confusion. "You didn't tell me you were inviting guests." Max's shoulders hunched slightly, his earlier excitement dimming. "I just wanted Nora to come," he said in a small voice. "She's fun. She makes dinosaur pancakes and tells good jokes." The silence that followed felt heavy with unspoken things. Nora stood frozen, the invitation still open in her hands, while Jacob looked between his son's hopeful face and her uncertain expression. Finally, Jacob's features softened. "We'd love to have you," he said, his voice careful and measured. "It's next Saturday afternoon. Nothing too fancy, just cake and games in the backyard." Nora managed a smile, though her heart was racing. "Thank you, Max. This is beautiful." She carefully tucked the invitation into her apron pocket. "Now, how about those dinosaur pancakes?" The rest of their visit passed in a blur of routine motions, but Nora's mind kept drifting to the weight of the invitation in her pocket. Later that night, after her shift ended, Nora walked home along the quiet streets. The invitation was in her hand now, and she found herself studying the careful crayon strokes, the earnest effort Max had put into every detail. A display window caught her eye. One of those high-end boutiques she usually hurried past. Mannequins posed in elegant cocktail dresses, their plastic forms draped in fabrics that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The lights inside were dim, but the dresses seemed to shimmer anyway, taunting her with their beauty. Nora's reflection ghosted over the glass, her waitress uniform, her practical shoes, her tired eyes. She stared at herself overlaid against those beautiful dresses and felt the distance between those two worlds like a physical ache. "You don't belong in that world," she whispered to her reflection, her breath fogging the glass slightly. But when she got home, she didn't throw the invitation away. Instead, she hung it on her fridge with a magnet shaped like a dinosaur, one of Lily's childhood toys they'd kept through all their moves. The crayon drawings caught the light from their small kitchen window, making the balloons seem to glow. The next day, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn of Jacob's estate. Classical music drifted through the air as a string quartet tuned their instruments beneath an elegant white tent. Servers in crisp black uniforms weaved between clusters of arriving guests, offering delicate hors d'oeuvres on silver trays. Jacob stood near the garden entrance, adjusting his navy silk tie for the third time in as many minutes. His eyes scanned the scene before him with practiced precision. The magician setting up his props on a small stage, the champagne flutes arranged in perfect rows, the carefully coordinated flower arrangements dotting the tables. Everything was exactly as he'd planned, meticulous, refined, and utterly proper. A small tug at his sleeve drew his attention downward. Max stood beside him, fidgeting with the collar of his new dress shirt. His dinosaur tie, a compromise Jacob had agreed to after much negotiation, was already slightly askew. "Do you think Nora's coming?" Max's voice was small but hopeful, his eyes fixed on the garden gate. Jacob swallowed, glancing at his watch. The party had started 15 minutes ago, and there was still no sign of the waitress who had somehow become such an important part of their Saturday mornings. "I hope so, buddy," he said, trying to keep his voice light despite the worry gnawing at him. Max had talked about nothing else all week. A server approached with a question about the cake presentation, and Jacob turned to address it, his mind already shifting back into event planning mode. He didn't notice Max's shoulders slump slightly as another group of guests arrived, none of them Nora. At the edge of the property, partially hidden behind a sculpted hedge, Nora stood frozen. In one hand, she clutched a small box wrapped in paper covered with cartoon dinosaurs. In the other, she held a kite, red and blue with a long tail that shimmered in the breeze. She'd spent hours choosing the gifts, wanting them to be perfect, but now everything felt inadequate. The sundress she wore, borrowed from a coworker, suddenly felt flimsy and plain compared to the designer outfits surrounding her. Women in flowing silk dresses walked past, their heels sinking slightly into the pristine grass. Men in tailored suits discussed stocks and market trends. Even the children looked like they'd stepped out of a luxury catalog. Nora's hand tightened around the kite's wooden handle. This was a mistake. She didn't belong here, in this world of string quartets and champagne flutes. She took a step backward, ready to retreat, when a sound cut through the elegant atmosphere. A child crying. Through a gap in the crowd, she saw Max. He was curled up in the grass, knees pulled to his chest, hands pressed against his ears. The noise, the crowd, the expectations. It had all become too much. Nearby guests were turning to stare, their whispers adding to the overwhelming cacophony. Jacob stood a few feet away, his face a mask of panic. His hands opened and closed helplessly at his sides as he watched his son break down. The composed businessman was gone, replaced by a father who didn't know how to help his child. Without thinking, Nora rushed forward. Her gifts were placed carefully on a nearby table as she knelt beside Max, her borrowed dress spreading around her on the grass. With practiced movements, she pulled a paper napkin from a nearby table and began folding it with swift, sure motions. "Hey, Max," she said softly, her voice steady and warm. "Want to help me fly this plane?" Max's sobs hitched slightly as he peeked out from behind his arms. Nora continued folding, her movements deliberate and calm. "Remember our breathing game?" she asked, smoothing one of the wings. One breath to lift the wings. Max hiccuped and took a shaky breath. "That's it," Nora encouraged. "Now one to steer the flight." Another breath, steadier this time, and one more to soar through the clouds. Max's hands slowly came down from his ears as he focused on the familiar rhythm. His breathing fell into sync with Nora's gentle instructions. The paper plane took shape between them, a simple thing amidst all the extravagance. When she handed him the finished plane, his fingers wrapped around it like an anchor. The tears had stopped, replaced by the ghost of a smile. Jacob watched the entire scene unfold, rooted to the spot. Something shifted in his expression as he observed Nora's gentle handling of his son. Not just relief, but a deeper kind of recognition. She'd done in moments what he hadn't known how to do at all. The party continued around them, but the atmosphere had changed. Max stayed close to Nora, showing her his favorite presents and introducing her to his few school friends. She moved through the crowd with natural grace, her simple dress forgotten as she focused entirely on making Max smile. As the sun began to set and guests started to leave, Jacob found Nora sitting alone at one of the tables. He approached with 2 cups of coffee, offering one to her. "I'm really glad you came," he said quietly, his voice carrying a weight of gratitude that went beyond simple politeness. Nora accepted the coffee, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "Max is a great kid," she replied softly, looking up at Jacob. "You're doing better than you think." Their eyes met over the rims of their coffee cups. Something passed between them. Not romance, Not yet, but understanding. Recognition. Connection. For the first time, they saw each other clearly, without the barriers of class or circumstance. The moment was broken by the sound of running feet. Max barreled into Nora's legs, wrapping his arms around them in a fierce hug. "Best birthday ever," he declared, his voice muffled against her dress. The Sunday morning sun filtered through the shelter's dusty windows, casting long shadows across piles of donated clothing. Nora stood at a folding table, mechanically sorting shirts by size, her movements slower than usual. Her mind kept drifting back to yesterday's party, the way Max's face lit up when he saw her, the unexpected warmth in Jacob's eyes when he brought her coffee. The shelter's familiar sense of laundry detergent and old coffee grounded her, but couldn't quite shake the lingering feeling that something fundamental had shifted. She picked up a faded denim jacket, examining a torn seam with unfocused eyes. "Earth to Nora." Tammy's voice cut through her thoughts. Her friend leaned against the table, a knowing smirk on her face. "You've been folding that same jacket for 5 minutes straight." Nora blinked, setting the jacket aside. "Just tired. Double shift yesterday, remember?" Tammy crossed her arms, her eyes twinkling. "Nothing to do with that fancy birthday party you went to? You're practically glowing, honey. Is it birthday magic or billionaire crush?" "Neither," Nora shot back, but her cheeks warmed traitorously. She busied herself with a stack of children's t-shirts. "It was just nice to see Max happy. That's all." Sure. Tammy picked up a sweater and started folding. And his daddy looking all dapper in his suit had nothing to do with it. Nora rolled her eyes, but her usual sharp comeback didn't come. Instead, she remembered the vulnerability in Jacob's face when Max was overwhelmed, the genuine gratitude in his voice when he thanked her. It wasn't attraction she felt, or at least not just attraction. It was recognition of something deeper, something that made her chest tight when she thought about it too long. "It's complicated," she finally said softly. "Ain't it always?" Tammy squeezed her shoulder and mercifully changed the subject to the upcoming food drive. The morning progressed with its usual rhythm, sorting donations, helping clients find what they needed, preparing lunch in the shelter's small kitchen. Nora lost herself in the familiar routine, finding comfort in the simple act of helping others. Around noon, she was organizing the pantry when she heard murmurs from the main room. Curious, she stepped out and nearly dropped the can of beans she was holding. Jacob Reed stood in the shelter's entrance, looking both determined and completely out of place. He wore jeans, actual denim jeans, and a simple gray sweater, but somehow managed to make even casual clothes look expensive. His eyes scanned the room until they found her. "Hi," he said, walking over. His usual confidence seemed slightly shaken. I hope it's okay that I came by." Nora recovered from her surprise, setting the can down carefully. "How did you know I'd be here?" "The Facebook page," he admitted, "from the cookie drive photo." "Ah." Nora studied him, noting the slight uncertainty in his stance. "Why are you here?" "I want to help," he said simply. "If you'll let me." Nora raised an eyebrow. "Have you ever volunteered before?" "No," he answered honestly, "but I can learn." She should have sent him away. This wasn't a photo op or a tax write-off opportunity, but something in his expression stopped her, the same earnestness she'd seen yesterday when he watched her with Max. "Fine," she said, making a quick decision. "We need help with dishes. Think you can handle that?" If he was disappointed with the menial task, he didn't show it. Instead, he rolled up his sleeves and followed her to the kitchen. Nora showed him the industrial sink, the sanitizing protocol, where to stack the clean dishes. "I'll check on you later," she said, half expecting him to be gone when she returned. But throughout the day, she caught glimpses of him working steadily. His technique was terrible. He used too much soap, arranged the dishes inefficiently, but he never complained. Water splashed on his expensive sweater. His hands turned red from the hot water, and still he kept at it. More surprising was how he interacted with the shelter's clients. When Mrs. Rodriguez came in to drop off her dishes after lunch, she started telling him about her grandchildren. Instead of the polite dismissal Nora expected, Jacob listened intently. He asked questions about her grandson's interest in computers, offered genuine suggestions about free coding programs for kids. Later, when Tommy, a regular who'd lost his job in construction, mentioned his struggle finding work, Jacob pulled out his phone. He wasn't showing off or networking. He was simply connecting Tommy with a friend's company that needed skilled laborers. Nora watched it all while pretending not to watch. She saw how Jacob's initial stiffness gradually melted away, replaced by genuine engagement. He wasn't trying to fix everything or throw money at problems. He was just present, listening, learning. By closing time, Jacob had washed hundreds of dishes, heard dozens of stories, and somehow managed to look both exhausted and energized. As the last clients left, Nora found him helping Tammy stack chairs. "There's leftover cookies from lunch," she said. "Want to take a break?" They ended up sitting on the curb outside the shelter, the setting sun painting the street in warm colors. The chocolate chip cookies were slightly stale, but neither seemed to mind. "This isn't your world," Nora said after a while, brushing crumbs from her lap. Jacob looked at her, then back at the street. "Neither is mine lately," he replied quietly. The admission hung between them in the evening air. Nora felt the weight of it, understood what it cost him to say it. She didn't offer platitudes or solutions. Instead, she simply held out the cookie container again. Jacob's lips curved into a small smile as he took another cookie. Nora smiled back, and for a moment, they just sat there, sharing cookies in silence as the day faded around them. Sometime later, the door slammed with enough force to rattle the frames on the wall of Nora's small apartment. Lily stormed in, her dark hair wild and her backpack swinging dangerously from one shoulder. Her face was flushed with anger, eyes blazing with the particular kind of fury only teenagers could muster. "I'm not a kid. Stop treating me like one." Lily's voice cracked with emotion as she faced her sister. Nora stood in the kitchen doorway, still wearing her diner uniform, her face tight with worry and frustration. The call from Lily's school counselor still rang in her ears. Third time skipping classes this month. Each time, a different excuse. Each time, a little more distance between them. "Treating you like a kid?" Nora's voice was steady, though her hands shook slightly. "Kids go to school, Lily. Kids don't lie about where they've been. Kids don't..." "Don't what?" Lily cut in, dropping her backpack to the floor with a thud. "Don't have to raise themselves because their sister is too busy playing house with some rich guy's kid." The words hung in the air like smoke. Nora felt them hit her chest, stealing her breath for a moment. She'd known Lily was angry, but this was different. This was aimed to hurt. "That's not fair," Nora said quietly, thinking of Max's sweet smile, of Jacob's genuine efforts to connect. "My job at the diner..." "You're not Mom!" Lily exploded, tears starting to stream down her face. "You're a waitress playing pretend." The apartment fell silent. Even the usual street noise seemed muted, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Nora felt the familiar ache in her chest, the one that appeared whenever someone mentioned their mother. She looked at her sister, really looked at her, seeing past the anger to the scared girl underneath. When Nora spoke, her voice was soft but firm. "Then start acting like someone worth pretending for." Lily's face crumpled for a moment before she spun around, rushing to her room. The second door slam of the night echoed through the apartment. Nora sank into a kitchen chair, letting out a long, shaky breath. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, counting down the hours until her early morning shift. The morning light was harsh and unforgiving as Nora pushed through the diner's front door. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her usual bounce was missing from her step. She tied her apron mechanically, barely registering Tammy's concerned look from across the counter. The bell above the door chimed, and Max's familiar voice filled the diner. "Nora, look what I made!" Despite her exhaustion, Nora managed a genuine smile as Max bounded toward her, Jacob following at a more measured pace. Max clutched a piece of paper in his small hands, practically vibrating with excitement. "What have you got there, buddy?" Nora asked, kneeling down to his level. Max proudly held up his drawing. It showed a stick figure with curly hair and an enormous smile, wearing what looked like an apron. Little hearts and stars surrounded the figure. "It's you," he declared, "because you always make people happy." Nora's throat tightened unexpectedly. She carefully took the drawing, treating it like the treasure it was. "This is beautiful, Max. Thank you." From above, Jacob's voice was gentle. "Are you okay? You seem tired." Nora stood up slowly, still holding Max's drawing. She shook her head, attempting a light tone but failing. Parenting a teenager is like juggling knives while blindfolded. Understanding flickered across Jacob's face. He turned to Max, who was already settling into their usual booth. "Hey, buddy, why don't you start on that new dinosaur book while I talk to Nora for a minute?" Max nodded, already pulling the book from his backpack. Jacob guided Nora to the counter, away from other customers' ears. "Want to talk about it?" he asked quietly. The simple question, coupled with his genuine concern, broke something loose in Nora. She found herself telling him about Lily, about the skipping school, the fighting, the fear that she was somehow failing at being both sister and parent. Jacob listened intently, his coffee growing cold beside him. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment before speaking. "After Sarah died," he began, his voice low. "Max stopped talking for almost 2 months. Just complete silence. I tried everything. Therapists, specialists, different schools. Nothing worked." He traced the rim of his coffee cup. "I was terrified I was destroying him somehow, that without his mother, he'd never be okay again." Nora watched his face, seeing the echo of that fear still present in his eyes. "What changed?" she asked softly. "I stopped trying to fix everything," Jacob admitted. "Started just being there, even when it hurt, even when I felt completely lost." He looked at her directly. "It's still hard, every day, but we're figuring it out together." They sat in comfortable silence, sharing the weight of their responsibilities, their love for their kids, their fears of not being enough. The morning crowd thinned out, leaving them in their own quiet bubble at the counter. "How do you do it?" Nora finally asked. "Balance everything?" Jacob smiled slightly. "Badly most days, but I keep trying. That's all we can do, right?" Nora nodded, feeling something loosen in her chest. They talked more as she worked, sharing stories about their kids, the good, the bad, the completely baffling. It wasn't attraction drawing them together in that moment, but something deeper, the shared understanding of loving a child so much it hurt. The apartment was quiet when Nora returned that evening, her feet aching from her shift. She expected another confrontation, another slammed door. Instead, she found Lily slumped over the kitchen table, fast asleep. An open math book lay under her crossed arms, pencil still loosely held in her fingers. Next to it was a piece of notebook paper, covered in Lily's familiar handwriting. Nora picked up the note carefully, not wanting to wake her sister. Her vision blurred as she read the words, "I'm sorry. I'll try harder. Don't give up on me." Tears spilled onto her cheeks as she looked at Lily's sleeping form. Not the angry teenager from last night, but her baby sister who still needed her, who was trying in her own way to bridge the gap between them. Nora smiled through her tears, gently brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. The note trembled slightly in her hand, each word a promise, a plea, a reminder of why she kept trying, even on the hardest days. The Sunday morning sun filtered through the shelter's dusty windows as Jacob knelt under the sink, his expensive watch carefully set aside and his sleeves rolled up past his elbows. Water dripped steadily onto his shoulder as he worked with the wrench, his forehead creased in concentration. Nora leaned against the counter nearby, pretending to sort through donation forms while stealing glances at him. There was something different about seeing him here, stripped of his usual corporate armor, genuinely trying to help. "Hand me that pipe fitting?" Jacob asked, pointing vaguely to the toolbox beside her. "The curved one or the straight one?" Nora held up both options. "Curved, and maybe a towel. This thing's determined to soak me." She passed him both items, their fingers brushing briefly. Jacob didn't seem to notice, but Nora felt the touch like a small electric shock. Tammy appeared beside her, arms crossed and eyebrows raised. "Well, well," she whispered, watching Jacob work. "Look who's becoming a regular handyman. He's either in love or incredibly lost." Nora kept her eyes fixed on the forms in front of her. "Probably both," she muttered, trying to ignore the way her heart jumped at Tammy's words. The pipe gave one final spray before Jacob managed to secure the fitting. He emerged from under the sink, his shirt spotted with water, but wearing a triumphant smile. "That should hold now," he announced, wiping his hands on the towel. "My hero," Tammy drawled, then winked at Nora before walking away. They spent the rest of the morning working side by side, sorting donations and helping serve lunch to the shelter's residents. Jacob moved with less certainty than he did in his corporate world, but his awkwardness had a genuine quality that made people warm to him quickly. As the afternoon wound down, they found themselves sitting on the back steps of the shelter, sharing a package of stale cookies from the kitchen. The spring air was warm, carrying the scent of newly bloomed flowers from the small community garden. "Max hasn't stopped talking about Thursday night," Jacob said, brushing crumbs from his pants. "He's convinced his dinosaur drawings are responsible for world peace now." Nora laughed, remembering how Max had explained his artistic process to everyone at the shelter. "He's got quite the imagination." "He does." Jacob paused, seeming to gather his courage. "Actually, I was wondering, would you and Lily like to come over for dinner this week? Nothing fancy," he added quickly, seeing her hesitation. "Just spaghetti and maybe some cartoons with Max. No staff, no suits. I promise." Nora studied his face, looking for any hidden agenda, but found only nervous sincerity. "I'll have to check with Lily," she said slowly. "She can be particular about new situations." "Of course. Just let me know." To her surprise, Lily agreed readily when asked. That's how they found themselves a few nights later, sitting around Jacob's kitchen island, while Max enthusiastically explained the plot of his favorite animated show to Lily. The formal dining room sat empty, the elegant table unused. Instead, they gathered around the kitchen counter, paper plates holding slightly overcooked spaghetti, garlic bread that was just a touch too crispy on the edges. Jacob had cooked himself, she realized. No chef, no perfection, just honest effort. Lily, initially reserved, had warmed up quickly when Max showed her his collection of comic books. Now they sat together on the floor of the living room, surrounded by colorful pages, Lily helping Max sound out the bigger words. "I haven't seen her this relaxed in months," Nora said softly, watching them from the kitchen where she and Jacob were cleaning up. "Max either," Jacob replied, loading dishes into the dishwasher. "He usually hides in his room when we have guests." The domesticity of the moment felt dangerous, too comfortable, too right. Nora busied herself wiping down the counter, trying to maintain some emotional distance. That's when she saw it, a stack of papers partially hidden behind a cookbook. Her hand moved before she could stop herself, pulling the documents into view. Legal letterhead, scholarship forms, private school admission papers, all with Lily's name typed neatly in the spaces. The world seemed to tilt sideways. She stared at the papers, her throat tightening as memories flooded back. Another man, another time, other promises of help that turned into chains. "Nora?" Jacob's voice seemed to come from far away. "Are you okay?" She grabbed the papers, turning to face him. "What is this?" Jacob's face fell slightly. "I was going to talk to you about it. The school Max attends has an excellent program, and when I mentioned Lily's situation to the headmaster—" "My sister's situation." Nora's voice was quiet, but sharp. "You mean her need to be fixed?" "That's not—" "We need to go." Nora moved quickly, gathering her purse. "Lily, get your jacket." "But we haven't finished the story," Max protested as Lily looked up, confused. "Now, Lily." Jacob followed them to the door, his face a mixture of confusion and concern. "Nora, please, can we talk about this?" She waited until they were outside, until Lily was safely out of earshot by the car, before turning to face him. "You're trying to fix me," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm trying to help," Jacob replied, looking stunned by her reaction. Nora felt tears threatening but held them back. "That's the same thing my ex said before taking everything I had." She turned away before he could respond, walking quickly to the car where Lily waited. As they pulled away from the curb, Nora caught a glimpse of Max in the window above. His small face pressed against the glass, a paper airplane held loosely in his hands. Dias later. The afternoon sun slanted through the apartment windows as Nora methodically folded laundry, her movements mechanical and distant. 3 days had passed since she'd walked away from Jacob's kitchen, and the weight of that moment still sat heavy in her chest. She hadn't returned to the shelter or picked up any of her usual diner shifts, calling in sick for the first time in 2 years. Lily sat at the kitchen table, pretending to do homework while stealing concerned glances at her sister. The apartment felt different, like the air itself had grown thicker with unspoken words. Nora's usual warmth and energy had dimmed to something quieter, more subdued. "The math test went okay," Lily offered, breaking the silence. "I remembered those formulas we practiced." Nora managed a small smile, adding another folded shirt to the growing pile. "That's great, sweetie." Before Lily could say more, a sharp knock echoed through the apartment. Nora set down the half-folded towel in her hands and walked to the door, her bare feet silent on the worn carpet. The moment she opened the door, all the air seemed to vanish from her lungs. Caleb stood in the hallway, looking exactly as he had 2 years ago. Clean-cut in an expensive button-down shirt, that familiar smug smile playing at the corners of his mouth. In his manicured hands, he held a thick manila envelope with official court stamps visible on the corner. "We need to talk," he said smoothly, as if he had every right to be there. Nora's fingers tightened on the door frame. "Lily," she called over her shoulder, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "Go to your room, please." "But—" "Now." Lily's chair scraped against the floor as she gathered her books, shooting a worried look at the door before disappearing down the hallway. Only when Nora heard the bedroom door click shut did she step aside, letting Caleb enter. He walked in like he owned the place, his expensive shoes clicking on the linoleum kitchen floor. His eyes swept over the modest apartment, the stack of unpaid bills on the counter, the secondhand furniture, the basket of unfolded laundry, and his smile widened slightly. "Coffee?" he asked, as if this were a social call. Nora moved to the coffee maker, grateful for something to do with her shaking hands. The familiar routine of measuring grounds and water gave her a moment to compose herself. Neither spoke as the machine gurgled to life. Finally, she set 2 mugs on the table and sat across from him. "What do you want, Caleb?" He took his time opening the envelope, arranging the papers with precise movements. "I'm filing for emergency guardianship of Lily," he said casually, as if discussing the weather. "The hearing is next week." The words hit Nora like a physical blow. "You have no right." "Actually, I do." He slid one of the papers across the table. As her mother's former partner and a stable presence in her early life, I have standing to petition, especially given your circumstances. What circumstances? Nora's voice was razor sharp. Let's see. Caleb leaned back, ticking points off on his fingers. Unstable employment. Waitressing and volunteer work hardly count as career prospects. Financial instability. This apartment isn't exactly prime real estate. And now you're involving yourself with wealthy men, bringing Lily into their homes. He pulled out his phone, showing her the Facebook photos from Max's birthday party. Jacob Reed, isn't it? Quite the step up from serving coffee. Nora's hands clenched under the table. You're bluffing. You don't want custody. Smart girl. Caleb's smile turned predatory. But the court doesn't know that. And neither does your new friend, Mr. Reed. I wonder what he'd think about investing in someone with such messy custody issues. The threat hung in the air between them. Nora felt sick, remembering how easily Caleb had manipulated situations before, how smoothly he could turn truth into whatever shape served him best. How much? She asked quietly. We can discuss numbers later. He stood, straightening his shirt. Take a few days to think about it. I'm sure you'll make the right choice. For Lily's sake, of course. After he left, Nora sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at the papers he'd left behind. The coffee grew cold in their mugs, untouched. The next day, during a slow afternoon at the diner, Nora finally broke down and told Tammy everything. They stood in the empty kitchen, Tammy's usual sharp wit softened by genuine concern as she listened. You have to tell Jacob, Tammy said when Nora finished. He has resources, connections. No. Nora shook her head firmly. I don't want him to save me. I can't. She swallowed hard. I can't let someone else have that kind of power again. This isn't about power, honey. It's about support. Before Nora could respond, the kitchen door swung open. Nora? It was Sarah, the hostess. Table 7 is asking for you specifically. Nora's heart stuttered when she saw who was sitting at table 7. Jacob and Max looked up as she approached, Max's face lighting up despite her 3-day absence. Jacob's expression was harder to read, concern mixed with something deeper, more complicated. Hi, she said softly. Can we talk? Jacob asked. Privately? They ended up in the empty back booth while Max colored at the counter under Tammy's watchful eye. The evening sun painted long shadows across the worn tabletop between them. I've been worried, Jacob said simply. We both have. Nora stared at her hands twisted together on the table. The weight of the past few days, Caleb's threats, the custody papers, the fear, suddenly felt too heavy to carry alone. Before she could stop herself, the whole story came pouring out. She told him everything, about Caleb's manipulation years ago, how he'd used her past against her, the way he'd taken advantage of her vulnerability when she was young and desperate to belong somewhere. She explained about his visit, the custody threat, the clear attempt at extortion. Jacob listened without interrupting. He didn't try to touch her or offer empty reassurances. He just let her talk, his presence steady and grounding. When she finally fell silent, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said simply and firmly, "You don't need me to fight for you. But I'll stand beside you while you do." The words wrapped around Nora's heart like a warm blanket. For the first time since Caleb had appeared at her door, she felt like she could breathe properly again. Monday morning arrived with a crisp autumn chill. Nora stood before the courthouse mirror in the women's restroom, adjusting the navy blazer she'd borrowed from Tammy. The sleeves were a touch too long, and the shoulders felt stiff, but it was the most professional thing she owned. Her reflection showed dark circles under her eyes that even concealer couldn't fully hide. Lily appeared beside her, already in her school uniform. "You look fine," she said, squeezing Nora's hand. Better than fine. Nora managed a small smile, though her stomach was doing somersaults. Together, they walked into courtroom B, their footsteps echoing on the polished floor. The room was smaller than Nora had imagined, with warm wood panels and morning light streaming through tall windows. Caleb was already there, lounging in his chair like this was just another business meeting. His lawyer, a sharp-featured woman in an expensive suit, was arranging papers on their table. When Caleb caught Nora's eye, he gave her that familiar smug smile that used to make her feel small. Not today. Nora and Lily took their seats beside their court-appointed attorney, Mr. Martinez. He was younger than Nora had expected, but his quiet confidence had helped calm her nerves during their preparations. Just as the bailiff called for all to rise, Nora heard the courtroom door open. She turned to see Jacob slipping in quietly, carrying a thick manila folder. He was dressed formally but not flashily, in a simple charcoal suit. Their eyes met briefly, and he gave her a small nod before taking a seat in the gallery. The judge, an older woman with steel gray hair and reading glasses perched on her nose, reviewed the initial paperwork. "This is a petition for emergency guardianship of minor Lily Hale, filed by Caleb Morrison against current guardian Nora Hale. Is that correct?" Both lawyers confirmed. The judge continued, "Ms. Hale, you'll testify first." Nora's legs felt shaky as she walked to the witness stand. After being sworn in, she sat down, folding her hands in her lap to keep them from trembling. Mr. Martinez approached. "Ms. Hale, please tell the court about your current situation as Lily's guardian." Nora took a deep breath. She'd practiced this, but now the words felt different, more real, more urgent. "I've been Lily's legal guardian for 3 years, since our mother passed away. I work as a waitress at Carter's Diner and volunteer at the Hope Harbor Community Shelter." "And your financial situation?" This was the hard part, but Nora lifted her chin and spoke clearly. "I won't pretend it's been easy. There was an eviction 2 years ago when I lost my second job. We lived in a shelter for 6 weeks while I got back on my feet. I have some debt from that time, but I've never missed a rent payment since, and Lily has never gone hungry." She continued, describing their small apartment, her careful budgeting, the way she'd arranged her shifts to always be home when Lily returned from school. Then she talked about the improvements, Lily's rising grades, her regular attendance, the math tutoring that was finally showing results. "The shelter work," she added, her voice growing stronger. "It's not just volunteer hours. It's showing Lily that even when you're struggling, you can still help others. That's the kind of stability I want for her. Not just financial, but emotional, moral." Caleb's lawyer cross-examined her next, trying to paint her as unstable and unfit. But Nora remained calm, acknowledging her struggles while standing firm on her progress. When asked about Jacob, she was direct. "Mr. Reed is a friend who has shown kindness to both me and Lily. Nothing more, nothing less." After what felt like hours, Nora returned to her seat. Lily immediately grabbed her hand under the table and squeezed. Then the clerk called, "Jacob Reed to the stand." Jacob walked forward with quiet confidence. After being sworn in, he sat comfortably, as if this were just another business meeting. But when he spoke, his voice carried something deeper than professional polish. "I met Nora Hale 6 months ago at Carter's Diner," he began. "I'm a regular customer there with my 6-year-old son, Max." Mr. Martinez guided him through questions about his observations of Nora. Jacob spoke carefully, choosing each word with precision. "My son barely spoke to anyone after his mother died," Jacob said, his voice softening. "He was withdrawn, struggling to connect. But Nora..." He paused, glancing at her briefly. "She didn't just serve us breakfast. She saw him, really saw him. She made paper planes, told silly jokes, cut his pancakes into dinosaur shapes. It sounds small, but to a grieving child, those small acts of consistent kindness are everything." He described watching Nora with Lily at the shelter, how she balanced firm boundaries with unconditional support. He talked about the birthday party, how Nora had calmed Max's anxiety attack with gentle patience while everyone else stood frozen. Caleb's lawyer tried to suggest that Jacob's wealth had influenced Nora's attention to Max, implying she was opportunistic. Jacob's response was immediate and firm. "Ms. Hale has never asked me for anything. Not money, not favors, not even help when she clearly needed it. In fact, she's turned down several offers of assistance, insisting on handling things herself." He leaned forward slightly. "You don't measure a guardian by their bank account. You measure them by how much they refuse to give up." The judge listened to closing arguments, reviewed the documents one final time, and then removed her glasses. The courtroom fell silent. "Mr. Morrison," she began, "your petition appears to be less about genuine concern for Lily's welfare and more about personal grievances. The court does not look kindly on using custody battles as leverage." She turned to Nora. "Ms. Hale, while your financial situation is not ideal, you've demonstrated consistent improvement and unwavering dedication to your sister's well-being. The petition for emergency guardianship is denied. Mr. Morrison, you are dismissed with a warning about frivolous custody claims." The gavel struck with finality. Outside the courthouse, the morning sun felt brighter somehow. Nora stood on the steps, her professional composure finally crumbling as tears spilled down her cheeks. These weren't tears of fear or sadness. They were pure relief, washing away months of anxiety. Lily threw her arms around her sister, holding tight. "You're the only one who's ever shown up for me," she whispered fiercely. "The only one who stayed." Nora hugged her back just as tightly, closing her eyes against fresh tears. When she opened them again, she saw Jacob standing a few steps away, giving them space for their moment. His presence had been like that throughout, strong but undemanding, supportive without taking over. Gently releasing Lily, Nora turned to him. "You showed up too," she said softly. Then, without overthinking it, she stepped forward and kissed him. It was gentle and brief, but it held all the words she couldn't say. "Thank you. I trust you. I'm ready." The morning sun cast long shadows across the empty park lot as Jacob parked. The air smelled of grass and early autumn. Max clutched his unopened birthday kite, while Nora and Lily carried picnic baskets. Lily wore her new camera from Jacob. "Can we fly it now?" Max asked excitedly. "Let's set up first, buddy. Then we'll have all morning," Jacob replied, ruffling his son's hair. They settled under a golden-edged oak tree. Nora spread the checkered blanket while Lily photographed dewy spiderwebs. Max unwrapped his rainbow Delta kite with unusual patience. "It's perfect," he whispered, touching the fabric. Jacob and Nora exchanged glances, noticing the change in their once overwhelmed son. After a leisurely breakfast picnic, Max stood determined. "I'm ready now." In the open field, Jacob helped with the string while Nora demonstrated proper technique. Lily captured everything with her camera. "It might take a few tries," Nora explained. "The wind is like a dance partner." Max ran forward. The kite wobbled until a gust lifted it skyward. "I did it!" he shouted. "Dad, look!" Jacob watched tearfully, understanding this was about more than a kite. Nora joined him. "He's stronger now," she said softly. "So am I," Jacob replied. Later, as the children flew the kite, Nora shared her plans to buy Carter's diner and transform it into a community cafe. "I think it's perfect," Jacob said. "I'd like to be there, not as an investor, just as family," Nora finished. A year later, Carter's community cafe thrived. Lily worked weekends, still taking photos. Max had his drawing corner for comics. Jacob watched Nora confidently manage the place, knowing every customer by name. Every Saturday at 9, they shared breakfast in their regular booth, unchanged physically, but transformed by love. If you enjoyed the story of Jacob and Nora, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it. If you enjoyed the story of Jacob and Nora, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.